All right, let's talk about Edwards versus Brady happening in London. This is a decent fight night, to be honest. It's happening local time in the UK, I believe, so none of that. Oh my god, it was 6 a.m., whatever, from Leon Edwards. That was his whole excuse last time versus Bilal. So let's get into it. Alright, so the first fight I want to talk about is Marcin Tybura versus Mick Parkin. Both decent heavyweights. Obviously, Mick Parkin coming up still, Tybura towards the end of his career. Both solid MMA fighters, I guess. Both like weigh 250 and over, so they're not small heavyweights. Starting off with Mick Parkin. He did get a submission his first UFC fight and a knockout his last, but the three in between they were all just decisions, 3-round decisions. So he's not like the most entertaining fighter. Not to look at Tybura. Tybura has fought everybody: Arlovsky, Derek Lewis, Spivak, Greg Hardy, Volkov, even Romanov, Tom Aspinall, Taito Ivasa, Spivak. So this guy's been around since 2016. He is obviously towards the end of his career. He's a grizzly vet, all that stuff. In my opinion, I'm just gonna say this: I think it's not gonna be the funnest fight, and Mick Parkin's probably taking him out in the second round. So that's my prediction for this fight. Alright, so the next fight I want to talk about is at 125. Both young fighters, both really exciting fighters. Both at the orthodox stance, both land a good amount of strikes per minute, both have very good accuracy, and neither of them are really wrestlers, so this should be an interesting one. Alright, starting off with Kavanaugh. He came from Cage Warriors. There's a few fighters that came from Cage Warriors. Obviously, the most, I guess, prestigious one being so far, I believe, Paddy Pimblett. And then he had a very nice first round knockout in Dana White Contender Series. And then a very, very fun 15-minute just war versus Ochoa. And yeah, he's looking promising so far, 8-0 in his young career. Right, so when we look at Felipe, he came from Brazil, obviously. He debuted in 2023 versus Manel Cap. Honestly, wasn't like the best. Obviously, like Manel Cap is really good, so that's a hard debut fight. And then won a split decision and then lost versus Andre Lima. So he is a fun fighter, but I don't know how good he is. So that's why I'm going to go with Kavanaugh for the win. Obviously, like, Kavanaugh's also not that experienced. This guy's, I don't know. We'll find out what he has. Alright, so for this next one, it's going to be Vucinic versus Duncan. Both same things, similar age, similar height, similar reach. The interesting thing about this fight is Vucinic coming in as a favorite, which I do understand because this guy has a win over Paul Hughes, and we saw how good Paul Hughes was recently, but then also lost against him. His win was a split decision win, and it was a 3-rounder, and then when it came to the 5 rounds, he did lose, and he did lose his first fight in the UFC to Guram, but I still think he got this, to be honest. Alright, for this next fight, Kevin Holland versus Gunnar Nelson. 4 year, I believe it's 4 years difference. Kevin Holland, the much taller fighter, like 4 inches, I believe. And this fight's going to be at welterweight, which is promising for Kevin Holland. So when we look at Gunnar Nelson, this guy has been inactive for around like 2 years now. And just in general, like, he had one fight in 2023, one fight in 2022. And then before that, he has a loss to Gilbert Burns, Leon Edwards, Ponzinibbio, even Damian Maia. Like, basically everyone who he comes up against that's elite, he ends up losing to. So I do think that trend is going to keep going. I don't know, unless he did some crazy shit during his 2 years off. I do think he's probably getting knocked out in this fight. Because when we look at Kevin Holland, this guy does have losses to Dolice, Renier de Ryder, MVP, JDM, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Hamza, all these guys. But then his wins are actually kind of underrated, in my opinion, versus Ole Chaychik. I don't know how to you say his name. He did beat Ponzinibbio, so that's a common opponent. He did beat Michael Chiesa. And I think like his last 5 fights, he only has 1 win. So I think this fight is going to have him motivated, hopefully. Hopefully we see something good out of Kevin Holland. But yeah, I do have him winning. So yeah, probably KO in the second or first round, in my opinion. Alright, for this next fight, Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. Similar height, similar reach. Obviously, Blachowicz being the much older fighter. But even I thought Carlos Oldberg would be a little bit younger. 34 is up there too. Both well-rounded fighters in my opinion. Yeah. So when we look at Jan, honestly, I don't know why he took the 2 years off after the Alex Pereira fight, because I think that very easily he could be in Alex Pereira's position. Maybe not like the activity or whatever, but I do believe if he beat Pereira, which it was a very close fight, he probably would have been champion. Obviously, he had the draw versus Ankalaev that I thought he lost, and admittedly he thought he lost. And then he also has very good wins. Obviously, Rakic, he beat Izzy, he beat Dominic Reyes back then. Like he's a very good underrated fighter, I think. I think he could make a run, and maybe fight Ankalaev like at a rematch for the title. Then we look at Carlos Oldberg. Last fight was kind of impressive. Volkan Ozdemir, Alonso Minifield, he's making his way up. His last loss was when Blachowicz defended his title against Izzy, so I don't know if that's like any semblance to that or whatever. And I do think he's still not good enough to beat Jan, even though like maybe like age caught up to Jan, but I do think I see Jan beating him, to be honest, and probably by a decision. And then we go on to the main event. Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. Leon Edwards, the taller fighter, just a little bit older, same. This is interesting, Southpaw versus Orthodox. Uh, Obviously, Leon Edwards being the better striker, just not as active, I would say. And Sean Brady just being the Bilal type fighter to where he just wants to wrestle, fuck you. Just wrestle, wrestle, wrestle. So yeah, it's interesting to see how Leon Edwards deals with that. So obviously, Leon coming off of the loss to Bilal. Before that, I don't care what anyone says, I always thought he was overrated. Obviously, he beat Kobe, washed. Kamaru, washed. Still, it was a close fight, even though he was washed. And in the second fight, I should say, he was getting dominated. He was being molested by Kamaru, and then just because people thought he got the takedown and he landed the head kick at the last round, people think, oh my god, it was a crazy win. Also, he got the title fight coming off of Nate Diaz and then eye poking Bilal, and then look at his resume. It's really not that impressive. Rafael dos Anjos, Gunnar Nelson, Donald Cerrone, like Vicente Luque. I guess his best win pre-title fight was Vicente Luque all those years ago. So I don't know, understand why people like, oh my god, he had the hardest way to the title fight and whatever. I do think he's mentally weak, and I don't know how he's gonna fare, honestly, holding up against a pressure wrestler like Sean Brady. And then we look at Sean Brady. I'm not gonna say he ran through Gilbert Burns, but he kind of did. He ran through Kevin Gastelum. He ran through Michael Chiesa. He ran through Jake Matthews. The only trouble he's had so far is when he got TKO'd by Bilal. And honestly, for that reason, I'm gonna go with just Sean Brady domination. I don't think he can submit him, but I do think it's gonna be like a fifth round. I know I just said no submission, but probably I see Sean Brady getting it done in the fifth round or by decision, because honestly, I think he can just break him. I think Leon just breaks easily. He had his excuse last fight. It was this time in the morning, even though he said he hired like a F1 sleep coach or something. Yeah, so I do have Sean Brady just dominating Leon Edwards, to be honest. So yeah, that's it for the video today. Honestly, I'd give this fight night card like an 8 out of 10. Very solid card. I think there's going to be some entertaining fights. This is not going to be one of them. Leon versus Sean Brady. Honestly, both boring fighters. Leon just overhyped because of that one head kick in his career. Other than that, like no finishes, or no notable finishes, I should say. Sean Brady, same thing, just a wrestle heavy guy. So I don't see this fight being too entertaining. The rest of the fight, I do see some knockouts. I do see some, even like if it's a decision but entertaining, I do see those. So yeah.